There were scattered the trophies which brought back strongly to my recollection the fact that Lord John Broxton was one of the great all-round sportsmen and athletes of his day. A dark blue oar, crossed with a cherry pink one above his mantelpiece, spoke of the old Oxonian and Neanderthal, while the foils and boxing gloves above and below them were the tools of a man who had won supremacy with each. Like a dado round the room was the jutting line of splendid heavy game heads, the best of their sort from every quarter of the world, with the rare white rhinoceros of the Lado enclave drooping its supercilious lid above them all. In the center of the rich red carpet was a black and gold Louis XV table, a lovely antique, now sacrilegiously desecrated with marks of glasses and the scars of cigar stumps. On it stood a silver tray of smokables and a burnished spirit stand, from which, and an adjacent siphon, my silent host proceeded to charge 2 high glasses. Then, seating himself opposite to me, he looked at me long and fixedly with his strange, twinkling, reckless eyes of a cold light blue, the color of a glacier lake. In the haze of my cigar smoke, I noted the details of a face which was already familiar to me from many photographs. The strongly curved nose, the hollow, worn cheeks, the dark, muddy hair, thin at the top, the crisp, virile mustaches, the small, aggressive tuft upon his projecting chin. Something there was of Napoleon III, something of Don Quixote, and yet again something which was the essence of the English country gentleman, the keen, alert, open-air lover of dogs and of horses. His skin was of a rich flower-pot red from sun and wind. His eyebrows were tufted and overhanging, which gave those naturally cold eyes an almost ferocious aspect, an impression which was increased by his strong and furrowed brow. In figure he was spare, but very strongly built. Indeed, he had often proved that there were few men in England capable of such sustained exertions. His height was a little over 6 feet, but he seemed shorter on account of a peculiar rounding of his shoulders. Such was the famous Lord John Broxton as he sat opposite to me, biting hard upon his cigar and watching me steadily in a long and embarrassing silence. "Well," said he at last, "we've gone and done it, young fellow, the lad." This curious phrase he pronounced as if it were all one word, young fellow, the lad.
Young fella,
Yes, we've taken a jump, you and me. I suppose now, when you went into that room, there was no such notion in your head. What? No thought of it. The same here, no thought of it. And here we are, up to our necks in the tureen. Why, I've only been back 3 weeks from Uganda and taken a place in Scotland and signed a lease and all. Pretty goings on. What? How does it hit you? Well, it is all in the main line of my business. I am a journalist on the Gazette. Of course, you said so when you took it on. And by the way, I've got a small job for you, if you'll help me. With pleasure. Don't mind taking a risk, do you? What is the risk? Well, it's Ballinger. He's the risk. You heard of him? No. Why, young fellow, where have you lived? Sir John Ballinger is the best gentleman jock in the North Country.
Open the sunroof
I
thing.
can hold him on the flat at my best, but over jumps, he's my master. Well, it's an open secret that when he's out at training, he drinks hard, striking and average, he calls it. He got delirium on Tuesday and has been raging like a devil ever since. His room is above this. The doctors say that it is all up with the old dear unless some food has got into him. But as he lies in bed with a revolver on his
Fortnite here.
and swears he will put 6 of the best through anyone that comes near him, there's been a bit of a strike among the serving men. He's a hard nail, is Jack, and a dead shot, too.
Why does he
but
look
you can't
like Walter
leave a
White?
Grand National winner to die like
well,
that. What?
It is what it
What
is.
do you mean to do, then? I asked. Well, my idea was that you and I could rush him. He may be dozing, and not the worst. He can only wean one of us, and the other should have him. If we can get his bolster cover around his arms and then phone up a stomach pump, we'll give the old dear the supper of his life. It was a rather desperate business to come suddenly into one day's work. I don't think that I am a particularly brave man. I have an Irish imagination, which makes the unknown and the untried more terrible than they are.
Oh, it's Pepe
On the
Chatelet.
other hand, I was
Hey.
brought up with a horror of cowardice and with a terror of such a stigma. I dare say that I could throw myself over a precipice like the haunted history books if my courage to do it were questioned. And yet it would surely be pride and fear, rather than courage, which would be my inspiration. Therefore, although every nerve in my body shrank from the whiskey-maddened figure which I pictured in the room above, I still answered, in as careless a voice as I could command, that I was ready to go. Some further remark of Lord Broxton's about the danger only made me irritable. Talking won't make it any better, said I. Come on. I rose from my chair, and he from his. Then, with a little confidential chuckle of laughter, he patted me 2 or 3 times on the chest, finally pushing me back into my chair. All right, Sonny, my lad. You'll
Sonny,
do,
my lad,
said he. I looked up in surprise. I saw after Jack Ballinger myself this morning. He blew a hole in the skirt of my kimono, bless his shaky old hand. But we got a jacket on him, and he's to be all right in a week. I say, young fella, I hope you don't mind. What? You see, between you and me, close-tiled, I look on this South American business as a mighty serious thing. And if I have a pal with me, I want a man I can bank on. So I sized you down, and I'm bound to say that you came well on it. You see, it's all up to you and me. For this old Summerlin man will want dry nursing from the first.
every time this guy drives somewhere, I get a notification on my phone.
Malone, who
They
is
said we would have
expected to get
flying
his
cars in
rugby cap for
2025.
Ireland.
It said we got social
Reserve, perhaps.
game.
I thought I remembered your face. Why, I was there when you got that try against Richmond. As fine a swerve and run as I saw the whole season. I'd never miss a rugby match if I can help it, for it is the manliest game we have left. Well, I didn't ask you in here just to talk sport. We've got to fix our business.
Sport.
Here are the sailors on the first page of the Times. There's a Booth boat from Para next Wednesday week, and if the professor and you can work it, I think we should take it. What? Very good. I'll fix it with him. What about your outfit? My paper will see to that.
Come on.
Can you shoot? About average territorial standard. Good Lord, as bad as that? It's the last thing you young fellas think of learning. You're all bees without stings, so far as looking after the hive goes.
Bees without
You'll look
stings.
silly some of these days when someone comes along and sneaks the honey. But you'll need to hold your guns straight in South America, for unless our friend the professor is a madman or a liar, we may see some queer things before we get back. What gun have you? He crossed to an open cupboard, and as he threw it open, I caught a glimpse of glistening rows of parallel barrels, like the pipes of an organ. I'll see what I can spare you out of my own battery, said he. One by one, he took out a succession of beautiful rifles, opening and shutting them with a snap and a clang, and then patting them as he put them back into the rack as tenderly as a mother would fondle her children. This is a Bland's 577 Axide Express.
We can't hear, sir.
I got that big fella with it. He glanced up at the white rhinoceros. 10 more yards, and he would have added me to his collection. On that conical bullet, his one chance hangs. 'Tis the weak one's advantage fair. Hope you know your Gordon, for he's the poet of the horse and the gun, and the man that handles both.
The gun.
Now, here's a useful tool. 470, telescopic sight, double ejector, point blank up to 350. That's the rifle I used against the Peruvian slave drivers 3 years ago. I was the flail of the Lord up in those parts, I may tell you, though you won't find it in any blue book. There are times, young fella, when every one of us must have a stand for human right and justice, or you never feel clean again. That's why I made a little war on my own. Declared it myself, waged it myself, ended it myself. Each of those nicks is for a slave murderer. A good row of them. What? That big one is for Pedro Lopez, the king of them all, that I killed in a backwater of the Putumayo River. Now, here's
All right,
something that will do
Robert.
for you.
Jesus Christ.
He took out a beautiful brown and silver rifle. Well, Robert, at the stock, sharply sighted, 5 cartridges to the clip. You can trust your life to that. He handed it to me and closed the door of his oak cabinet. By the way, he continued, coming back to his chair, what do you know of this Professor Challenger? I never saw him till today. Well, neither did I. It's funny, we should both sail under sealed orders from a man we don't know. He seemed an uppish old bird. His brothers of science don't seem too fond of him either. How came you to take an interest in the affair? I told him shortly my experiences of the morning, and he listened intently. Then he drew out a map of South America and laid it on the table. I believe every single word he said to you was the truth, said he earnestly. And mind you, I have something to go on when I speak like that. South America is a place I love, and I think, if you take it right through from Darien to Fuego, it's the grandest, richest, most wonderful bit of earth upon this planet. People don't know it yet, and don't realize what it may become. I've been up and down it from end to end, and had 2 dry seasons in those very parts, as I told you when I spoke of the war I made on the slave dealers. Well, when I was up there, I heard some yarns of the same kind, traditions of Indians and the like, but with something behind them, no doubt. The more you know of that country, young fella, the more you would understand that anything is possible. Anything. There are just some narrow water lanes along which folk travel, and outside that, it is all darkness.
Darkness.
Now, down here in Mato Grande,
one.
he swept his cigar over a part of the map, or up in this corner where 3 countries meet, nothing would surprise me. As that chap said tonight, there are 50,000 miles of waterway running through a forest that is very near the size of Europe. You and I could be as far away from each other as Scotland is from Constantinople, and yet each of us be in the same great Brazilian forest. Man has just made a track here and a scrape there in the maze. Why, the river rises and falls the best part of 40 feet, and half the country is a morass that you can't pass over. Why shouldn't something new and wonderful lie in such a country? And why shouldn't we be the men to find it out? Besides, he added, his queer, gaunt face shining with delight, there's a sport and risk in every mile of it. I'm like an old golf ball. I've had all the white paint knocked off me long ago. Life can whack me about now, and it can't leave a mark. But a sport and risk, young fellow, that's the salt of existence. Then it's worth living again. We're all getting a deal too soft and dull and comfy. Is to be my comrade for many a day, and so I have tried to set him down as I first saw him, with his quaint personality and his queer little tricks of speech and of thought. It was only the need of getting in the account of my meeting which drew me at last from his company. I left him seated amid his pink radiance, oiling the lock of his favorite rifle, while he still chuckled to himself at the thought of the adventures which awaited us. It was very clear to me that if dangers lay before us, I could not in all England have found a cooler head or a braver spirit with which to share. That night, weary as I was after the wonderful happenings of the day, I sat late with McArdle, the news editor, explaining to him the whole situation, which he thought important enough to bring next morning before the notice of Sir George Beaumont, the chief. It was agreed that I should write home full accounts of my adventures in the shape of successive letters to McArdle, and that these should either be edited for the Gazette as they arrived, or held back to be published later, according to the wishes of Professor Challenger, since we could not yet know what conditions he might attach to those directions which should guide us to the unknown land. In response to a telephone inquiry, we received nothing more definite than a fulmination against the press, ending up with the remark that if we would notify our boats, he would hand us any directions which he might think it proper to give us at the moment of starting. A second question from us failed to elicit any answer at all, save a plaintive bleat from his wife to the effect that her husband was in a very violent temper already, and that she hoped we would do nothing to make it worse. A third attempt later in the day, provoked a terrific crash, and a subsequent message from the Central Exchange that Professor Challenger's receiver had been shattered. After that, we abandoned all attempts at communication. And now, my patient readers, I can address you directly no longer. From now onwards, if indeed any continuation of this narrative should ever reach you, it can only be through the paper which I represent. In the hands of the editor, I leave this account of the events which have led up to one of the most remarkable expeditions of all time, so that if I never return to England, there shall be some record as to how the affair came about. I am writing these last lines in the saloon of the Booth liner Francisca, and they will go back by the pilots to the keeping of Mr. McArdle. Let me draw one last picture before I close the notebook. A picture which is the last memory of the old country which I bear away with me. It is a wet, foggy morning in the late spring. A thin, cold rain is falling. 3 shining Macintoshed figures are walking down the quay, making for the gangplank of the great liner from which the Blue Peter is flying. In front of them, a porter pushes a trolley piled high with trunks, wraps, and gun cases. Professor Summerlee, a long, melancholy figure, walks with dragging steps and drooping head, as one who is already profoundly sorry for himself. Lord John Roxton steps briskly, and his thin, eager face beams forth between his hunting cap and his muffler. As for myself, I am glad to have got the bustling days of preparation and the pangs of leave-taking behind me, and I have no doubt that I show it in my bearing. Suddenly, just as we reach the vessel, there is a shout behind us. It is Professor Challenger, who had promised to see us off. He runs after us, a puffing, red-faced, irascible figure.
Irascible.
"No, thank you," says he. "I should much prefer not to go aboard. I have only a few words to say to you, and they can very well be said where we are. I beg you not to imagine that I am in any way indebted to you for making this journey. I would have you to understand that it is a matter of perfect indifference to me, and I refuse to entertain the most remote sense of personal obligation. Truth is truth, and nothing which you can report can affect it in any way. Though it may excite the emotions and allay the curiosity of a number of very ineffectual
What if you
people,
crash? Oh,
my directions for your instruction and guidance are in this seal and
piss you a merry
you
shit,
will
must we
open it
piss
when you
you a
reach
merry
a town
shit,
upon
must
the Amazon which is called
we piss you
Manaus,
a merry shit.
but not until the date and hour which is marked upon the outside.
Oh my gosh.
Have I made myself clear?
Yes, you made yourself clear.
I leave the strict observance of my conditions entirely to your honor. No, Mr. Malone, I will place no restriction upon your correspondence, since the ventilation of the facts is the object of your journey.
There we go.
Thus, I demand that you shall give no particulars as to your exact
Let's hope
destination,
you don't.
and that
Fingers
nothing
crossed,
be
thank you.
actually published until your return.
Oh my goodness.
Goodbye, sir.
Goodbye,
You
sir.
have done something to mitigate my feelings for the loathsome profession to which you unhappily belong. Goodbye, Lord John. Science is, as I understand, a sealed book to you, but you may congratulate yourself upon the hunting field which awaits you. You will, no doubt, have the opportunity of describing in the field how you brought down the rocketing Dimorphodon. And goodbye to you also, Professor Summerlee. If you are still capable of self-improvement, of which I am frankly unconvinced, you will surely return to London a wiser man. So he turned upon his heel, and a minute later, from the deck, I could see his short, squat figure bobbing about in the distance as he made his way back to his trade. Well, we are well down channel now. There's the last bell for letters, and it's goodbye to the pilot. We'll be down, hull down on the old trail from now on. God bless all we leave behind us, and send us safely back. Chapter 7. Tomorrow we disappear into the unknown. I will not bore those whom this narrative may reach by an account of our luxurious voyage upon the Booth liner, nor will I tell of our week's stay at Para, save that I should wish to acknowledge the great kindness of the Perea de Pinta Company in helping us get together our equipment. I will also allude very briefly to our river journey, up a wide, slow-moving, clay-tinted stream in a steamer which was little smaller than that which had carried us across the Atlantic. Eventually, we found ourselves through the narrows of Obidos and reached the town of Manaus. Here, we were rescued from the limited attractions of the local inn by Mr. Shortman, the representative of the British and Brazilian Trading Company. In his hospital, Fazenda, we spent our time until the day when we were empowered to open the letter of instructions given to us by Professor Challenger. Before I reach the surprising events of that date, I would desire to give a clearer sketch of my comrades in this enterprise, and of the associates whom we had already gathered together in South America. I speak freely, and I leave the use of my material to your own discretion, Mr. McCardle, since it is through your hands that this report must pass before it reaches the world. The scientific attainments of Professor Summerlee are too well known for me to trouble to recapitulate them. He is better equipped for a rough expedition of this sort than one would imagine at first sight. His tall, gaunt, stringy figure is insensible to fatigue, and his dry, half-sarcastic, and often wholly unsympathetic manner is uninfluenced by any change in his surroundings. Though in his 66th year, I have never heard him express any dissatisfaction at the occasional hardships which we have had to encounter. I have regarded his presence as an encumbrance to the expedition, but as a matter of fact, I am now well convinced that his power of endurance is as great as my own. In temper, he is naturally acid and skeptical. From the beginning, he has never concealed his belief that Professor Challenger is an absolute fraud, that we are all embarked upon an absurd wild goose chase, and that we are likely to reap nothing but disappointment and danger in South America, and corresponding ridicule in England. Such are the views which, with much passionate distortion of his thin features and wagging of his thin goat-like beard, he poured into our ears all the way from Southampton to Manaus. Since landing from the boat, he has obtained some consolation from the beauty and variety of the insect and bird life around him, for he is absolutely wholehearted in his devotion to science. He spends his days flitting through the woods with his shotgun and his butterfly net, and his evenings in mounting the many specimens he has acquired. Among his minor peculiarities are that he is careless as to his attire, unclean in his person, exceedingly absent-minded in his habits, and addicted to smoking a short briar pipe, which is seldom out of his mouth. He has been on several scientific expeditions in his youth. He was with Robertson at Papua, and the life of the camp and the canoe is nothing fresh to him. Lord John Roxton has some points in common with Professor Summerlee, and others in which they are the very antithesis to each other. He is 20 years younger, but has something of the same spare, scraggy physique. As to his appearance, I have, as I recollect, described it in that portion of my narrative which I have left behind me in London. He is exceedingly neat and prim in his ways, dresses always with great care in white drill suits and high brown mosquito boots, and shaves at least once a day. Like most men of action, he is laconic in speech, and sinks readily into his own thoughts, but he is always quick to answer a question or join in the conversation, talking in a queer, jerky, half-humorous fashion. His knowledge of the world, and very especially of South America, is surprising, and he has a wholehearted belief in the possibilities of our journey, which is not to be dashed by the sneers of Professor Summerlee. He has a gentle voice and a quiet manner, but behind his twinkling blue eyes there lurks a capacity for furious wrath and implacable resolution, the more dangerous because they are held in leash. He spoke little of his own exploits in Brazil and Peru, but it was a revelation to me to find the excitement which was caused by his presence among the riverine natives, who looked upon him as their champion and protector. The exploits of the Red Chief, as they called him, had become legends among them, but the real facts, as far as I could learn them, were amazing enough. These were that Lord John had found himself some years before in that no-man's land which is formed by the half-defined frontiers between Peru, Brazil, and Colombia. In this great district, the wild rubber tree flourishes, and has become, as in the Congo, a curse to the natives, which can only be compared to their forced labor under the Spaniards upon the old silver mines of Darien. A handful of villainous half-breeds dominated the country, armed such Indians as would support them, and turned the rest into slaves, terrorizing them with the most inhuman tortures in order to force them to gather the India rubber, which was then floated down the river to Para. Lord John Roxton expostulated on behalf of the wretched victims, and received nothing but threats and insults for his pains. He then formally declared war against Pedro Lopez, the leader of the slave drivers, enrolled a band of runaway slaves in his service, armed them, and conducted a campaign which ended by his killing with his own hand the notorious half-breed, and breaking down the system which he represented. No wonder that the ginger-headed man with the silky voice and the free and easy manners was now looked upon with deep interest upon the banks of the great South American River, though the feelings he inspired were naturally mixed, since the gratitude of the natives was equaled by the resentment of those who desired to exploit them. One useful result of his former experiences was that he could talk fluently in lingua geral, which is the peculiar talk, 1/3 Portuguese and 2/3 Indian, which is current all over Brazil. I have said before that Lord John Roxton was a South American maniac. He could not speak of that great country without ardor, and this ardor was infectious, for ignorant as I was, he fixed my attention and stimulated my curiosity. How I wish I could reproduce the glamour of his discourses, the peculiar mixture of accurate knowledge and of racing imagination which gave them their fascination, until even the professor's cynical and skeptical smile would gradually vanish from his thin face as he listened. He would tell the history of the mighty river so rapidly explored, for some of the first conquerors of Peru actually crossed the entire continent upon its waters, and yet so unknown in regard to all that lay behind its ever-changing banks. "What is there?" he would cry, pointing to the north. "Wood,
Dr. Thunder!
Unpenetrated jungle.
Of course, I have Dr. Thunder in my fridge.
Shelter. And there, to the south, a wilderness of swampy forest where no white man has ever been. The unknown is up against us on every side. Outside the narrow lines of the rivers, what does anyone know? Who will say what is possible in such a country? Why should old man Challenger not be right?" At which direct defiance, a stubborn sneer would reappear upon Professor Summerlee's face, and he would sit, shaking his sardonic head in unsympathetic silence, behind the cloud of his briar-root pipe. So much for the moment for my two white companions, whose limitations will be further closed, as surely as my own, as this narrative proceeds. But already we have enrolled certain retainers who may play no small part in what is to come. The first is a gigantic Negro named Zamba, who is a perfect Hercules, as willing as any horse, and about as intelligent. Him we enlisted at Para, on the recommendation of the steamship company, on whose vessels he had learned to speak a halting English. It was at Para also that we engaged Gomez and Manuel, two half-breeds from up the river, just come down with a cargo of redwood. They are swarthy fellows, bearded and fierce, as active and wiry as panthers. Both of them had spent their lives in those upper waters of the Amazon which we were about to explore, and it was this recommendation which had caused Lord John to engage them. One of them, Gomez, had the further advantage that he could speak excellent English.
Where's Big D?
These men were willing to act as our personal
Probably
servants,
sleeping.
to cook, to row, or to make themselves useful in any way at a payment of $15 a month. Besides these, we had engaged 3 Mojo Indians from Bolivia, who are the most skillful at fishing and boat work of all the river tribes. The chief of these we call Mojo, after his tribe, and the others are known as Jose and Fernando. 3 white men, then 2 half-breeds, 1 Negro, and 3 Indians made up the personnel of the little expedition which lay waiting for its instructions at Manaus before starting upon its singular quest. At last, after a weary week, the day had come, and the hour. I ask you to picture the shaded sitting room of the Fazenda St. Ignacio, 2 miles inland from the town of Manaus.
How much longer until I get home?
Outside lay the yellow, brassy glare of the sunshine, with the shadows of the palm trees as black and definite as the trees
Possibly
themselves.
9 hours.
The air was calm, full of the eternal hum of
Possibly closer to
insects,
6.
a tropical chorus of many octaves.
Just depends.
From the deep drone of the bee to the high, keen pipe of the mosquito. Beyond the veranda was a small cleared garden, bounded with cactus hedges and adorned with clumps of flowering shrubs, round which the great blue butterflies and the tiny hummingbirds fluttered and darted in crescents of sparkling light. Within, we were seated round the cane table, on which lay a sealed envelope. Inscribed upon it, in the jagged handwriting of Professor Challenger, were the words, "Instructions to Lord John Roxton and party, to be opened at Manaus upon July 15th, at 12 o'clock precisely." Lord John had placed his watch upon the table beside him. "We have 7 more minutes," said he. "The old dear is very precise." Professor Summerlee gave an acid smile as he picked up the envelope in his gaunt hand. "What can it possibly matter whether we open it now or in 7 minutes?" said he. "It is all part and parcel of the same system of quackery and nonsense,
Quackery.
for which I regret to say that the writer is notorious." "Oh, come, we must play the game according to the rules," said Lord John. "It's old man Challenger's show.
Just under.
Here by his goodwill.
I'll be on
So
the
it
stream
would
for
be
another
rotten
2-3
bad
hours, then I'm
form
going to
if we
leave
didn't
and get
follow
on
his
another account,
instructions
okay?
to the letter."
Awesome.
"A pretty business it is," cried the professor bitterly. "It struck me as preposterous in London, but I'm bound to say that it seems even more so upon closer acquaintance. I don't know what is inside the envelope, but unless it is something pretty definite, I shall be much tempted to take the next downriver boat and catch the Bolivia at Para. After all, I have some more responsible work in the world than to run about disproving the assertions of a lunatic. Now, Roxton, surely it is time."
Surely.
"Time it is," said Lord John.
Chip, chip,
"You
governor."
can blow the whistle." He took up the envelope and cut it with his penknife. From it, he drew a folded sheet of paper. This he carefully
I'll let you
opened
know
out
I am
and flattened on the
awesome.
table. It was a blank sheet. He turned it over. Again, it was blank. We looked at each other in a bewildered silence, which was broken by a discordant burst of derisive laughter from Professor Summerlee. "Now, it is an open admission," he cried. "What more do you want? The fellow is a self-confessed humbug. We have only to return home and report him as the brazen imbecile that he is." "Invisible ink?" I suggested. "I don't think," said Lord Roxton, holding the paper to the light. "No, young fellow, my lad, there is no use deceiving yourself. I'll go bail for it that nothing has ever been written upon this paper." "May I come in?" boomed a voice from the veranda. The shadow of a squat figure had stolen across the patch of sunlight. That voice, that monstrous breadth of shoulder. We sprang to our feet with a gasp of astonishment as Challenger, in a round, boyish straw hat with a colored ribbon, Challenger, with his hands in his jacket pockets and his canvas shoes daintily pointing as he walked, appeared in the open space before us. He threw back his head, and there he stood in the golden glow with all his old Assyrian luxuriance of beard, all his native insolence of drooping eyelids and intolerant eyes.
The haters
"I fear," said he, taking out his watch, "that I am a few minutes too late. When I gave you this envelope, I must confess that I had never intended that you should open it, for it had been my fixed intention to..."
I'm only going to be talking for a few minutes.
Okay. Here, I'll mute him for a second. Hold on. We are back on. Thanks, though. Did the dogs eat their extra long cozy food?
Yeah, Jen actually wouldn't shut up.
He was going, whoa, 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 whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, he was being really annoying.
No, that's cozy. We like that when he does that. Dr. Thunder says, I don't like haters.
You know, like haters.
Dr. Thunder doesn't like haters. Don't we have a Dr. Thunder in the fridge, babe?
We do.
Mm-hmm. That's cozy.
I'm actually kind of surprised you haven't drank that yet.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to start, as soon as I open it, you're going to appear right before I finish it. You're going to be like, all right, I'm taking my first sip. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you talking to? This is Beck Beck. Mm-hmm. You'll see her in some of the dog videos. Mm-hmm. Think so.
Think so. Oh shit, I need my work keys.
Uh-oh. I can't wait for the snow. I hope it shuts the whole fucking city down for 3 days.
Yeah, I'll bet you do.
Who is the funniest person who's ever joined one of your streams? Dr. Thunder's up there, the master of memes, right? Dr. Thunder. But we also like Pepe Chatelet. We like Aiden Doyle.
Wasn't there
Yeah, who do you remember,
a
man?
couple of people on your live stream and you're fixing the car were pretty funny.
Oh, yeah. We need to do another car fixing. You mean the 8 inches of... Dr. Thunder, how do you know about the snow coming? How does Dr.
Dave, I think it's kind of a national story.
Oh, is it?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. That's cozy. I just wanted to shut the whole fucking city down for 3 days. Oh, Dr. Thunder wants to be a meteorologist. Dr. Thunder wants to be a vegetarian, or no, meteorologist. I've studied it for 3 weeks. Chatelet, why don't you come on, Pepe Chatelet? Pepe Chatelet. Think so. Come on. I said, think so. I said, think so. Pepe Chatelet. Dr. Thunder has studied weather for 7 years now. Oh, wait, that's why your name's Dr. Thunder. It's not about the Dr. Pepper drink. I was 4 when I started, and I'm now 11. Well, happy birthday, Dr. Thunder.
What is an 11-year-old doing up at this time?
Maybe they're in a different time zone, babe.
That is true.
It's a wide world.
I mean, they've already pre-salted the roads.
Okay, well, hurry up and brush all the salt off so we can, so the roads can be fun.
Cozy tomorrow?
Yeah. It's not my birthday. Happy early birthday or happy late birthday, your choice. Chatelet, why don't you Pepe Chatelet?
Babe, I'm actually really glad that I switched for an alcohol shift, because this means that for sure I will not have to deal with a bunch of shit at the end of the shift.
That's cozy. Unless he's like, well, actually, do you want to just stay the whole time?
And then I should not take that though, because if there's a chance I'll miss work tomorrow, I would have missed all the overtime.
So you should stay late today if you can?
What?
So you should stay late today if you can?
No, I should not.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know. Because overtime is like the last thing that gets put on your paycheck. So, saying that like if we get snowed in tomorrow, like I'll just lose all the overtime that I worked.
That's not very cozy.
Yeah. Even if I have open in sick time.
Well, you could always walk to work. I'd walk with you.
You'd have to hang out at work all day.
What do you mean?
Like, you literally have to be at the store the whole shift.
Why would I have to be there the whole shift?
Well, you wouldn't have to be at my store directly, but, like, I would not want you to walk back and then walk back to the
Why not?
It's like a 3-hour walk and it's freezing and people are reckless drivers.
Oh, no. The way I walk, most of the walk avoids the road.
For this house?
Yeah. I never walked from the other place, babe.
That is true.
I've got
You'll have to show me your route sometime.
Yeah, it's a secret route.
I'm not sure that it's still warm enough clothes to
Yeah.
wear in the drop.
All you need is sweatpants and then jeans over the top, and then you're good.
It does not sound like I'd be toasty enough.
Oh, you'd be roasty and toasty.
I probably need like heated pants.
Nah, yeah. If you have like leggings on and then something over the top, you'd be fine. They sort of.
Remember when Christy just like fell over?
They canceled the snow in Arkansas. Well, we're not in Arkansas. Hold on, say that again, babe.
So remember when Christy was so cold that she just like fell over?
Yeah, I do remember that. Why don't you pepe Chatelet?
Yeah, today's good as fuck.
I think it'd be cozy to walk. Because the dogs would be walking with us and they'd go woof woof. Don't you think they'd go woof woof? Have I ever been to Smackover, Arkansas before? I don't know that I have. Chatelet, pepe Chatelet.
No, we need to discuss vacation.
Oh, February?
Yeah. I'd be okay without going to camp.
Oh, I think we gotta go.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way too, but like, I think if we can't afford it, like, I'm fine. So I do feel like we should try and go, because your grandma's always, well, who knows if I'll be able to go next year. So.
Pepe Chatelet with... Dr. Thunder says they can make you laugh.
So, I also know you wanted to go to Chicago first, and then...
Well, not necessarily. Chatelet, why don't you pepe Chatelet? Chatelet, why don't you pepe Chatelet? Pepe Chatelet. Don't read this out loud. Chatelet.
Let's say you failed that test.
What test?
Don't read this out loud.
Chatelet, why don't you pepe Chatelet?
God, the roads are like really deserted this morning.
You just did.
But
I think read it out loud. Oh, did you see I took the hot dogs out of the hot dogs out of the freezer?
yeah, I was curious what you were going to do with those.
Well, do you want to get some extra long cozy hot dog buns?
I really didn't want to go to Walmart today.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not gonna lie, you might have better luck stopping by a store out in Salina.
Oh, yeah, maybe I will. Chatelet, why don't you pepe Chatelet? Pepe Chatelet. Okay, I don't like it when there's a cop. But currently there is a cop behind me. Chatelet. No, he doesn't have his lights on, but he's just... I'm drunk, la 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 la. Chatelet.
The road, the loaded enforcement began.
Oh, well, I'm in Kansas.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're like where you are.
Oh, thank God the cop is passing me. Chatelet, why don't you? Deputy Sheriff, ugh, your dumbass car, your stupid fucking. Ugh. Babe, I'm so glad the cop didn't shoot me. Chatelet, why don't you pepe Chatelet? Come on. Yeah, I bet they have hot dog buns in Salina. Salina invented hot dog buns. What am I saying? Kiss you and shitless. Come on.
Nope. I think so.
What is the funniest thing you ever heard from me, from Dr. Thunder? Bum 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 bum. Dr. Thunder asking me if I have any haters. I don't got haters. That's the funniest thing. I don't got haters. Cause the haters gonna hate. I'll just shake it off. These dogs are so cozy. These dogs are so cozy. These dogs are so cozy. Yes, 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 these dogs are so cozy. What's that, babe?
Bring the PetSmart blue polos.
What about the PetSmart blue polos?
We're abandoning them.
What?
Yep.
In favor of what?
Red t-shirts.
So, like, you'll be forbidden from wearing the blue polos?
No, you just won't be able to.
You won't be able to get them anymore? Do you get free polos or free t-shirts?
Yeah. What?
Oh, is there like a particular limit?
So it's like whenever there's an event going on, they send them to the store, and then you're supposed to wear that specific shirt during the event.
And then you get to keep it.
Yeah, but sometimes they tell you can't wear them after the event.
But you still keep it, right?
Yeah. Oh god, could you imagine trying to go to Costco today?
Yeah, I bet people are gonna be going nuts. We need milk and eggs and toilet paper. Do we have eggs, by the way? Well, not in Salina. Unless I just have my windows down on the ride back. Can you play the song
have,
Big
like, a
Boom on your
cooler?
phone? No, I don't. No, I don't. I do not have a cooler. We piss you a merry shit, must we piss you a merry shit?
No.
Sorry. Thanks so. I said thanks.
So,
Go.
remember last night when I wanted you to say that one word that I hate?
One word, the what?
The one word I hate?
Yeah, I do remember that. That was cozy. Yes, these dogs are cozy. Yes, these dogs are cozy. Can you play the song Big Boom? I can't play the song Big Boom because the problem with playing the song Big Boom is I'll get zucked. I don't want to get zucked. Yes, these dogs are cozy. They are so cozy. Yes, they are so cozy. Yes, these dogs are cozy. They are so cozy. They are so cozy. Yes, these dogs are cozy. They are so cozy. What's your favorite song? Banana Phone by Raffi. Ring, 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 ring. Banana phone. Do, 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 do. Ping pong, ping pong, ping pong, ping. Banana phone. It's no baloney. It ain't a phony. It's a cellular, bananular phone. I don't need quarters. I don't need dimes to have a real good time. Don't need a TV. Don't need a something else to call a friend of mine. Banana phone. Ping pong, ping pong, ping pong. Banana phone, it's no baloney. It ain't a phony, it's a cellular, bananular phone. Alright, come on. I said
Oh my
thanks.
god.
What?
I'll take a photo and send it to you, but I don't have to go.
Alright, love you.
Love you too.
Alright, bye.
Bye.
A cellular, bananular phone. I said, thanks so. I said, thanks so. I said, thanks so. I said, thanks so. Thanks though, thanks though, thanks though, thanks though, thanks.
You before they are. The unfortunate delay can be apportioned between a blundering pilot and an intrusive sandbag. I fear it has given my colleague, Professor Summerlee, occasion to blaspheme. I am bound to say, sir, said Lord John with some sternness of voice,
I gotta pee. I'll be back. Your dog is humping me. Oh, nice.
For our mission seems
I'm back. There it goes. All right. All right, can you get out of the way? Thank you. Thanks, though. Thanks, though. Thanks, though. I'm going west. That's where I'm going. West is where I'm going. I'm going west. Caw-caw, I'm a bird. She never sent me any photos. I'm a bee. Alright, let's get this fucking check. Oh, itchy. Thanks though. Is this the Krusty Krab? No, this is Patrick. No, this is Patrick. Can this fucking car move? Yes, these dogs are so cozy. Yes, these dogs are cozy. These dogs are cozy. A winter storm warning may affect your route. When is the... I thought the winter storm doesn't start for freaking forever from now. Is this the Krusty Krab? No, this is Patrick. Alright, let's get the book going. Come on. If Jack should want his food, he would want his food. And Rilla would also want her food. Well, yes, she would want her food. Yes, she... Yes, these dogs, they are so good. They are the best dogs in the land. They are good dogs.
For our mission seemed to have come to a premature end. Even now, I can't for the life of me understand why you should have worked it in so extraordinary a manner. Instead of answering, Professor Challenger entered, shook hands with myself and Lord John, bowed with ponderous insolence to Professor Summerlee, and sank back into a basket chair, which creaked and swayed beneath his weight. "Is all ready for your journey?" he asked. "Well, we can start tomorrow."
This is Patrick. Is this
"Then
the
so
Krusty
you shall. You need no chart of directions now. Then you will have the inestimable advantage of my own guidance. From the first, I had determined that I would myself preside over your investigation. The most elaborate charts would, as you readily admit, be a poor substitute for my own intelligence and advice. As to the small ruse which I played upon you in the matter of the envelope, it is clear that
just got
had
a
I
major
told
winter storm
you
warning.
all my intentions, I should have been forced to resist unwelcome pressure to travel out with you." "Not from me, sir," exclaimed Professor Summerlee heartily. "So long as there was another ship upon the Atlantic." Challenger waved him away with his great hairy hand. "Your common sense will, I am sure, sustain my objection. and realized that it was better that I should direct my own movements and appear only at the exact moment when my presence was needed. That moment
No,
has
it does
now
not say 2
arrived.
to 4 foot of
You
snow.
are in safe hands. You will not now fail to reach
That'd
your
be nuts.
destination. From henceforth, I take command of this expedition, and I must ask you to complete your preparations tonight, so that we may be able to make an early start in the morning. My time is of value, and the same may be said, no doubt, in a lesser degree of your own. I propose, therefore, that we push on as rapidly as possible until I have demonstrated what you have come to see.
Think so?
Lord John Roxton has chartered a large steam launch, the Esmeralda, which was to carry us up the river. So far as climate goes, it was immaterial what time we chose for our expedition, as the temperature ranges from 75 to 90 degrees both summer and winter, with no appreciable difference in heat. In moisture, however, it is otherwise. From December to
10 to
May
12
is the
inches,
period of
there
the
you go.
rains, and during this time the river slowly rises until it attains a height of nearly 40 feet above its low water mark. It floods the banks, extends in great lagoons over a monstrous waste of country, and forms a huge district called locally the Gapa, which is for the most part too marshy for foot travel and too shallow for boating. About June the waters begin to fall, and are at their lowest at October or November. Thus, our expedition was at the time of the dry season, when the great river and its tributaries were more or less in a normal condition. The current of the river is a slight one, the drop being not greater than 8 inches in a mile. No stream could be more convenient for navigation, since the prevailing wind is southeast, and sailing boats may make a continuous progress to the Peruvian frontier, dropping down again with the current. In our own case, the excellent engines of the Esmeralda could disregard the sluggish flow of the stream, and we made as rapid progress as if we were navigating a stagnant lake. For 3 days we steamed northwestwards, up a stream which even here, 1,000 miles from its mouth, was still so enormous that from its center the 2 banks were mere shadows upon the distant skyline. On the 4th day after leaving Manaus, we turned into a tributary, which at its mouth was little smaller than the main stream. It narrowed rapidly, however, and after 2 more days steaming, we reached an Indian village, where the professor insisted that we should land, and that the Esmeralda should be sent back to Manaus. We should soon come upon rapids, he explained, which would make its further use impossible. He added privately that we were now approaching the door of the unknown country, and that the fewer whom we took into our confidence, the better it would be. To this end also he made each of us give our word of honor that we would publish or say nothing which would give any exact clue as to the whereabouts of our travels, while the servants were all solemnly sworn to the same effect. It is for this reason that I am compelled to be vague in my narrative, and I would warn my readers that in any map or diagram which I may give, the relation of places to each other may be correct, but the points of the compass are carefully confused, so that in no way can it be taken as an actual guide to the country. Professor Challenger's reasons for secrecy may be valid or not, but we had no choice but to adopt them, for he was prepared to abandon the whole expedition rather than modify the conditions upon which he would guide us. It was August 2nd when we snapped our last link with the outer world by bidding farewell to the Esmeralda. Since then, 4 days have passed, during which we have engaged 2 large canoes from the Indians, made of so light a material, skins over a bamboo framework, that we should be able to carry them round any obstacle. These we have loaded with all our effects, and have engaged 2 additional Indians to help us in the navigation. I understand that they are the very 2, Ataka and Ipetu by name, who accompanied Professor Challenger upon his previous journey. They appeared to be terrified at the prospect of repeating it, but the chief has patriarchal powers in these countries, and if the bargain is good in his eyes, the clansman has little choice in the matter. So, tomorrow, we disappear into the unknown.
It's supposed to happen Monday or
This
Tuesday.
account I am
Who knows?
transmitting down the river by canoe, and it may be our last word to those who are interested in our fate. I have, according to our arrangement, addressed it to you, my dear Mr. McCardle, and I leave it to your discretion to delete, alter, or do what you like with it. From the assurance of Professor Challenger's manner, and in spite of the continued skepticism of Professor Summerlee, I have no doubt that our leader will make good his statement, and that we are really on the eve of some most remarkable experiences.
Yes, these
The outlying pickets of the New World. Our friends at home may well rejoice with us, for we are on our goal, and up to a point at least, we have shown that the statement of Professor Challenger can be verified. We have not, it is true, ascended the plateau, but it lies before us, and even Professor Summerlee is in a more chastened mood. Not that he will for an instant admit his rival could be right, but he is less persistent in his incessant objections, and has sunk, for the most part, into an observant silence. Right.
Check out the quality of this drone. I put this big rock underneath it to mark it for fire.
I must hark back, however, and continue my narrative from where I dropped it. We are sending home one of our local Indians who is injured, and I am committing this letter to his charge, with considerable doubts in my mind as to whether it will ever come to hand. When I wrote last, we were about to leave the Indian village where we had been deposited by the Esmeralda. I have to begin my report by bad news. For the first serious personal trouble, I pass over the incessant bickerings between the professors, occurred this evening, and might have had a tragic ending. I have spoken of our English-speaking half-breed Gomez, a fine worker and a willing fellow, but afflicted, I fancy, with the vice of curiosity, which is common enough among such men. On the last evening, he seems to have hid himself near the hut in which we were discussing our plans, and being observed by our huge Negro, Zambo, who is as faithful as a dog and has the hatred which all his race bear to the half-breeds, he was dragged out and carried into our presence. Gomez whipped out his knife, however, and but for the huge strength of his captor, which enabled him to disarm him with one hand, he would certainly have stabbed him. The matter has ended in reprimand. The opponents have been compelled to shake hands, and there is every hope that all will be well. As to the feuds of the two learned men, they are contiguous and bitter. It must be admitted that Challenger is provocative in the last degree, but Summerlee has an acid tongue, which makes matters worse. Last night, Challenger said that he never cared to walk on the Thames embankment and look up the river, as it was always sad to see one's own eventual goal. He is convinced, of course, that he is destined for Westminster Abbey. Summerlee rejoined, however, with a sour smile, by saying that he understood that Millbank Prison had been pulled down. Challenger's conceit is too colossal to allow him to be really annoyed. He only smiled in his beard and repeated, "Really, really," in the pitying tone one would use to a child. Indeed, they are children both, the one wizened and cantankerous, the other formidable and overbearing, yet each with a brain which has put him in the front rank of his scientific age. Brain, character, soul. Only as one sees more of life does one understand how distinct is each. The very next day we did actually make our start upon this remarkable expedition. We found that all our possessions fitted very easily into 2 canoes, and we divided our personnel, 6 in each, taking the obvious precaution in the interests of peace of putting 1 professor into each canoe. Personally, I was with Challenger, who was in a beatific humor, moving about as one in a silent ecstasy and beaming benevolence from every feature. I have had some experience of him in other moods, however, and shall be the less surprised when the thunderstorms suddenly come up amidst the sunshine. If it is impossible to be at your ease, It is equally impossible to be dull in his company, for one is always in a state of half-tremulous doubt as to what sudden turn his formidable temper may take. For 2 days we made our way up a good-sized river some hundreds of yards broad, and dark in color but transparent, so that one can usually see the bottom. The affluents of the Amazon are, half of them, of this nature, while the other half are whitish and opaque, the difference depending upon the class of country through which they have flowed. The dark indicate vegetable decay, while the others point to clayey soil. Twice we came across rapids, and in each case made a portage of half a mile or so to avoid them. The woods on either side were primeval, which are more easily penetrated than woods of the second growth, and we had no difficulty in carrying our canoes through them. How shall I ever forget the solemn mystery of it? The height of the trees and the thickness of the boughs exceeded anything with which I, in my town-bred life, could have imagined, shooting upwards in magnificent columns, until, at an enormous distance above our heads, we could dimly discern the spot where they threw out their side branches into Gothic upward curves, which coalesced to form one great matted roof of verdure, through which only an occasional golden ray of sunshine shot downwards to trace a thin, dazzling line of light amidst the majestic obscurity. As we walked noiselessly amid the thick, soft carpet of decaying vegetation, the hush fell upon our souls which comes upon us in the twilight of the Abbey, and even Professor Challenger's full-chested notes sank into a whisper. Alone, I should have been ignorant of the names of these giant growths, but our men of science pointed out the cedars, the great silk cotton trees, and the redwood trees, with all that profusion of various plants which has made this continent the chief supplier to the human race of those gifts of nature which depend upon the vegetable world, while it is the most backward in those products which come from animal life. Vivid orchids and wonderful colored plantings smoldered upon the swarthy tree trunks, and where a wandering shaft of light fell full upon the golden alamanda, the scarlet star clusters of the taxonia, or of the rich deep blue of Ipomaea, the effect was as a dream of fairyland. In these great wastes of forests, life, which abhors darkness, struggles ever upwards to the light. Every plant, even the smaller ones, curls and writhes to the green surface, winding itself round its stronger and taller brethren in the effort. Climbing plants are monstrous and luxuriant, but others, which have never been known to climb elsewhere, learn the art as an escape from that somber shadow, so that the common nettle, the jasmine, and even the Hasitara palm tree can be seen circling the stems of the cedars and striving to reach their crowns. Of animal life there is no movement amid the majestic vaulted aisles which stretched from us as we walked.
Am I the funniest person who joined one of my dreams? You've not joined my dreams yet.
Snake and monkey, bird and sloth,
I don't think.
which lived in the sunshine and looked down in wonder at our tiny, dark, stumbling figures in the obscure depths immeasurably below them. At dawn and at sunset, the howling monkeys screamed together, and the parrots broke into shrill chatter. And during the hot hours of the day, only the full drone of insects, like the beat of a distant surf, filled the air, while nothing moved amid the solemn vistas of stupendous trunks faded away into the darkness which hemmed us in. Once, some bandy-legged lurching creature, an anteater or a bear, scuttled clumsily amid the shadows. It was the only sign of earth life which I saw in this great Amazonian forest. And yet there were indications that even human life itself was not far from us in those mysterious recesses. On the third day out, we were aware of a singular deep throbbing in the air, rhythmic and solemn, coming and going fitfully throughout the morning. The two
Pepe
boats were
Chatelet's
paddling
pretty
within a few
good.
yards of each other when first we heard it, and our Indians remained motionless, as if they had been turned to bronze, listening intently with expressions of terror upon their faces. "What is it, then?" I asked. "Drums," said Lord John carelessly. "War drums. I have heard them before." "Yes, sir, war drums. said Gomez, the half-breed. Wild Indians, bravos, las mansos. They watch us every mile of the way. Kill us if they can. How can they watch us? I asked, gazing into the dark, motionless void. The half-breed shrugged his broad shoulder. The Indians know. They have their own way. They watch us. They talk to
They have their own way.
each other. Kill us if they can. By the afternoon of that day, my pocket diary shows me that it was Tuesday, August 18th.
Tuesday.
At least 6 or 7 drums were throbbing from various points. Sometimes they beat quickly, sometimes slowly, sometimes in obvious question and answer. One, far to the east, breaking out in a high staccato rattle, and being followed after a pause by a deep roll from the north. There was something indescribably nerve-shaking and menacing in that constant mutter, which seemed to shape itself into the very syllables of the half-breed, endlessly repeated, "We will kill you if we can. We will kill you if we can." No one ever moved in the silent woods. All the peace and soothing quiet nature lay in that dark curtain of vegetation, but away from behind there came ever the one message from our fellow man. "We will kill you if we can," said the man in the east. "We will kill you if we can."
Am I the funniest person that's joined your streams?
All day,
You gotta compete.
Whispered.
It's still up in the air.
Reflected itself in the faces of our
Pepe
fellow
Chatelays.
companions. Even the high, swaggering half-breed seemed cowed.
Pretty
I
good.
learned, however, that day, once for all, that both Summerlee and Challenger possessed that highest type of bravery, the bravery of the scientific mind. Theirs was the spirit which upheld Darwin among the gauchos of the Argentine, or Wallace among the headhunters of Malaya. It is decreed by a merciful nature that the human brain cannot think of two things simultaneously, so that if it be steeped in curiosity as to science, it has no room for merely personal considerations. All day, amid that incessant and mysterious menace, our two professors watched every bird upon the wing and every shrub upon the bank, with many a sharp, wordy contention, while the snarl of Summerlee came quick upon the deep growl of Challenger, but with no more sense of danger and no more reference to drum-beating Indians than if they were seated together in the smoking room of the Royal Society's Club in St. James's Street.
St. James
Once
Street.
only did they condescend to discuss them. Miranda or Amahuaca cannibals.
I know I'm the handsomest that has joined one of your streams. That very well may be.
No doubt, sir, Summerlee answered. Like all such tribes, I shall expect to find them of polysynthetic speech and of Mongolian type. Polysynthetic, certainly, said Challenger indulgently. I am not aware that any other type of language exists in this continent, and I have notes of more than 100. The Mongolian theory I regard with deep suspicion. I should have thought that even a limited knowledge of comparative anatomy would have helped to verify it, said Summerlee bitterly. Challenger thrust out his aggressive chin until he was all beard and hackles. No doubt, sir, a limited knowledge would have that effect. But when one's knowledge is exhaustive, one comes to other conclusions. They glared at each other in mutual defiance, while all round rose the distant whisper, "We will kill you. We will kill you if we can." That night, we moored our canoes with heavy stones for anchors in the center of the stream, and made every preparation for a possible attack. Nothing came, however, and with the dawn we pushed upon our way, the drum beating dying out behind us. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we came to a very steep rapid, more than a mile long, the very one in which Professor Challenger had suffered disaster upon his first journey. I confess that the sight of it consoled me, for it was really the first direct corroboration, slight as it was, of the truth of his story. The Indians carried first our canoes and then our stores through the brushwood, which is very thick at this point, while we four whites, our rifles on our shoulders, fought between them and any danger coming from the woods. Before evening, we had successfully passed the rapids and made our way some 10 miles above them, where we anchored for the night. At this point, I reckoned that we had come not less than 100 miles up the tributary from the main stream. It was in the early forenoon of the next day that we made the great departure. Since dawn, Professor Challenger had been acutely uneasy, continually scanning each bank of the river. Suddenly, he gave an exclamation of satisfaction and pointed to a single tree, which projected at a peculiar angle over the side of the stream. "What do you make of that?" he asked. "It is surely an acai palm," said somebody. "Exactly. It was an acai palm which I took for my landmark. The secret opening is half a mile onwards upon the other side of the river. There is no break in the trees. That is the wonder and the mystery of it. There, where you see the light green rushes instead of dark green undergrowth, there between the great cottonwoods, that is my private gate into the unknown. Push through, and you will understand." It was indeed a wonderful place. Having reached the spot marked by a line of light green rushes, we pulled our two canoes through them for some hundreds of yards, and eventually emerged into a placid and shallow stream, running clear and transparent over a sandy bottom. It may have been 20 yards across, and was banked in on each side by most luxuriant vegetation. No one who had not observed that for a short distance reeds had taken place of shrubs could possibly have guessed the existence of such a stream, or dreamed of the fairyland beyond. For
Game
a fairyland
over.
it was, the most wonderful that the imagination of man could conceive. The thick vegetation met overhead, interlacing into a natural pergola, and through this tunnel of verdure in a golden twilight flowed the green, pellucid river, beautiful in itself, but marvelous from the strange tints thrown by the vivid light from above, filtered and tempered in its fall. Clear as crystal, motionless as a sheet of glass, green as the edge of an iceberg, it stretched in front of us under its leafy archway, every stroke of our paddles sending 1,000 ripples across its shining surface. It was a fitting avenue to a land of wonders. All sign of the Indians had passed away, but animal life was more frequent, and the tameness of the creatures showed that they knew nothing of the hunting. Fuzzy little black velvet monkeys with snow-white teeth and gleaming, mocking eyes chattered at us as we passed. With a dull, heavy splash, an occasional caiman plunged in from the bank. Once, a dark, clumsy tapir stared at us from a gap in the bushes, and then lumbered away through the forest. Once, too, the yellow, sinuous form of a great puma whisked amid the brushwood, and its green, baleful eyes glared hatred at us over its tawny shoulder. Bird life was abundant, especially the wading birds, stork, heron, and ibis gathering in little groups, blue, scarlet, and white, upon every log which jutted from the bank, while beneath us the crystal water was alive with fish of every shape and color. For 3 days we made our way up this tunnel of hazy green sunshine. On the longer stretches, one could hardly tell as one looked ahead where the distant green water ended and the distant green archway began. The deep peace of this strange waterway was unbroken by any sign of man. "No Indian here. Too much afraid. Kurupuri," said Gomez. "Kuripuri is the spirit of the woods," Lord John explained. "It's a name for any kind of devil. The poor beggars think that there is something fearsome in this direction, and therefore they avoid it." On the third day, it became evident that our journey in the canoes could not last much longer, for the stream was rapidly growing more shallow. Twice in as many hours we stuck upon the bottom. Finally, we pulled the boats up among the brushwood and spent the night on the bank of the river. In the morning, Lord John and I made our way for a couple of miles through the forest, keeping parallel with the stream. But as it grew ever shallower, we returned and reported what Professor Challenger had already suspected, that we had reached the highest point to which the canoes could be brought. We drew them up, therefore, and concealed them among the bushes, blazing a tree with our axes, so that we should find them again. Then we distributed the various burdens among us: guns, ammunition, food, a tent, blankets, and the rest. And shouldering our packages, we set forth upon the more laborious stage of our journey. An unfortunate quarrel between our pepper pots marked the outset of our new stage. Challenger had, from the moment of joining us...
All right, I'll be back. I think so. Hey, I'm gonna join you on another account, okay? Okay. There it goes. Oh.
Discontent of Summerlee. Now, upon his assigning some duty to his fellow professor, it was only the carrying of an aneroid barometer, the matter suddenly came to a head. "May I ask, sir," said Summerlee, with vicious calm, "in what capacity you take it upon yourself to issue these orders?" Challenger glared and bristled. "I do it, Professor Summerlee, as a leader of this expedition. I am compelled to tell you, sir, that I do not recognize you in that capacity."
Whoa.
"Indeed," Challenger bowed with unwieldy sarcasm. "Perhaps you would define my exact position." "Yes, sir. You are a man whose veracity is upon trial, and this committee is here to try it. You walk, sir, with your judges." "Dear me," said Challenger, seating himself on the side of one of the canoes. "In that case, you will, of course, go on your way, and I will follow at my leisure. If I am not the leader, you cannot expect Lord John Roxton and myself to prevent the petulance and folly of our learned professors from sending us back empty-handed to London. Such arguing and pleading and explaining before we could get them mollified. Then, at last, Summerlee, with his sneer and his pipe, would move forwards. Challenger would come rolling and grumbling after. By some good fortune, we discovered about this time that both our savants had the very poorest opinion of Dr. Illingworth of Edinburgh. Thenceforward, that was our one safety, and every strained situation was relieved by our introducing the name of the Scotch zoologist, and both our professors would form a temporary alliance and friendship in their detestation and abuse of this common rival. Advancing in a single file along the bank of the stream, we soon found that it narrowed down to a mere brook, and finally that it lost itself in a great green morass of sponge-like mosses, into which we sank up to our knees. The place was horribly haunted by clouds of mosquitoes, and every form of flying pest, so we were glad to find solid ground again, and to make a circuit among the trees, which enabled us to outflank this pestilent morass, which droned like an organ in the distance, so loud was it with insect life. On the second day, after leaving our canoes, we found that the whole character of the country changed. Our road was persistently upwards, and as we ascended, the woods became thinner and lost their tropical luxuriance. The huge trees of the alluvial Amazonian plain gave place to the phoenix and cocoa palms, growing in scattered clumps, with thick brushwood between. In the damper hollows, the Mauritia palms threw out their graceful drooping fronds. We traveled entirely by compass, and once or twice there were differences of opinion between Challenger and the two Indians, when, to quote the professor's indignant words, the whole party agreed to trust the fallacious instincts of undeveloped savages, rather than the highest product of modern European culture. That we were justified in doing so was shown upon the third day, when Challenger admitted that he recognized several landmarks of his former journey, and in one spot we actually came upon 4 fire-blackened stones, which must have marked the camping place. The road is still ascended, and we crossed a rock-studded slope which took 2 days to traverse. The vegetation had again changed, and only the vegetable ivory tree remained, with a great profusion of wonderful orchids, among which I learned to recognize the rare Newtonia vixillaria and the glorious pink and scarlet blossoms of the Cartelia and Odontoglossum. Occasional brooks with pebbly bottoms and fern-draped banks gurgled down the shallow gorges in the hill, and offered good camping grounds every evening on the banks of some rock-studded pool, where swarms of little blue-backed fish, about the size and shape of English trout, gave us a delicious supper. On the 9th day after leaving the canoes, having done, as I reckon, about 120 miles, we began to emerge from the trees, which had grown smaller until they were mere shrubs. Their place was taken by an immense wilderness of bamboo, which grew so thickly that we could only penetrate it by cutting a pathway with the machetes and billhooks of the Indians. It took us a long day, traveling from 7 in the morning till 8 at night, with only 2 breaks of 1 hour each, to get through this obstacle. Anything more monotonous and wearying could not be imagined, for even at the most open places I could not see more than 10 or 12 yards, while usually my vision was limited to the back of Lord John's hot jacket in front of me, and to the yellow wall within a foot of me on either side. From above came one thin knife edge of sunshine, and 15 feet over our heads one saw the tops of the reeds swaying against the deep blue sky. I do not know what kind of creatures inhabit such a thicket, but several times we heard the plunging of large, heavy animals quite close to us. From their sounds, Lord John judged them to be some form of wild cattle. Just as night fell, we cleared the belt of bamboos, and at once formed our camp, exhausted by the interminable day. Early next morning we were again afoot, and found that the character of the country had changed once again. Behind us was the wall of bamboo, as desolate as if upon the course of the river. In front was an open plain, sloping slightly upwards and dotted with clumps of tree ferns, the whole carving before us until it ended in a long, whale-backed ridge. This we reached about midday, only to find a shallow valley beyond, rising once again into a gentle incline which led to a low, rounded skyline. It was here, while we crossed the first of these hills, that an incident occurred which may or may not have been important. Professor Challenger, who with the two local Indians was in the van of the party, stopped suddenly and pointed excitedly to the right. As he did, so we saw, at the distance of a mile or so, something which appeared to be a huge gray bird flap slowly up from the ground and skim smoothly off, flying very low and straight, until it was lost among the tree ferns. "Did you see it?" cried Challenger in exultation. "Salina, did you see it?" His colleague was staring at the spot where the creature had disappeared. "What do you claim that it was?" he asked. "To the best of my belief, a pterodactyl."
Dun dun dun!
Salina burst into derisive laughter. "After fiddlestick," said he.
Yes,
"It was a
into the
stork
thick of it.
if ever I saw one." Challenger was too furious to speak. He simply swung his pack upon his back and continued upon his march. Lord John came abreast of me, however, and his face was more grave than was his wont. He had his sized glasses in his hand. "I focused it before it got over the trees," said he. "I won't undertake to say what it was, but I'll risk my reputation as a sportsman that it wasn't any bird that I ever clapped eyes on in my life." So there the matter stands. Are we really just at the edge of the unknown, encountering the outlying pickings of this lost world of which our leader speaks? I give you the incident as it occurred, and you will know as much as I do. It stands alone, for we saw nothing more which could be called
the bushes.
And now, my readers, if ever I have any, I have brought you up the broad river and through the screen of rushes, down the green tunnel, and up the long slope of palm trees and through the bamboo brake and across the plain of tree ferns. At last, our destination lay in full sight of us. When we had crossed the second bridge, we saw before us an irregular column-studded plain, and then a line of high red cliffs which I have seen in the picture. There it lies, even as I write, and there can be no question that it is the same. At the nearest point, it is about 7 miles from our present camp, and it curves away, stretching as far as I can see. Challenger struts about like a prize peacock, and summonly is silent, but still skeptical. Another day should bring some of our doubts to an end. Meanwhile, as Jose, whose arm was pierced by a broken bamboo, insists upon returning, I send this letter back in his charge, and only hope that it may eventually come to hand. I will write again as the occasion serves. I have enclosed with this a rough chart of our journey, which may have the effect of making the account rather easier to understand. Who could have foreseen it? A dreadful thing has happened to us. Who could have foreseen it? I cannot foresee any end to our troubles. It may be that we are condemned to spend our whole lives in this strange, inaccessible place. I am still so confused that I can hardly think clearly of the facts of the present or of the chances of the future.
If I drive this much, yeah, it's a lot of driving.
To my astounded senses, the one seems most terrible, and the other as black as night. No men have ever found themselves in a worse position, nor is there any use in disclosing to you our exact geographical situation and asking our friends for a relief party. Even if they could send one, our fates will, in all human probability, be decided long before it could arrive in South America. We are, in truth, as far from any human aid as if we were in the moon. If we are to win through, it is only our own qualities which can save us. I have as companions 3 remarkable men of great brain power and of unshaken courage. There lies our one and only hope. It is only when I look upon the untroubled faces of my comrades that I see some glimmer through the darkness. Outwardly, I trust that I appear as unconcerned as they. Inwardly, I am filled with apprehension. Let me give you, with as much detail as I can, the sequence of events which have led us to this catastrophe. When I finished my last letter, I stated that we were within 7 miles from an enormous line of flooded cliffs, which encircled, beyond all doubt, the plateau of which Professor Challenger spoke. Their heights, as we approached them, seemed to me in some places to be greater than he had stated, running up in parts to at least 1,000 feet, and they were curiously striated in a manner which is, I believe, characteristic of basaltic upheavals. Something of the sort is to be seen in Salisbury Crags at Edinburgh. The summit showed every sign of a luxuriant vegetation, with bushes near the edge, and farther back many high trees. There was no indication of any life that we could see. That night we pitched our camp immediately under the cliff, a most wild and desolate spot. The crags above us were not merely perpendicular, but curved out a thin pinnacle of rock which I believe I mentioned earlier in this narrative. It is like a broad red church spire, the top of it being level with the plateau, but a great chasm gaping between. On the summit of it there grew one high tree. Both pinnacle and cliff were comparatively low, some 500 or 600 feet, I should think. It was on that, said Professor Challenger, pointing to this tree, that the pterodactyl was perched. I climbed halfway up the rock before I shot him. I am inclined to think that a good mountaineer like myself could ascend the rock to the top, though he would, of course, be no nearer to the plateau when he had done so. As Challenger spoke of his pterodactyl, I glanced at Professor Summerlee, and for the first time I seemed to see some signs of a dawning credulity and repentance. There was no sneer on his thin lips, but, on the contrary, a grey, drawn look of excitement and amazement. Challenger saw it too, and revelled in the first taste of victory. "Of course," said he, with his clumsy and ponderous sarcasm, "Professor Summerlee will understand that when I speak of a pterodactyl, I mean a stork. Only it is the kind of stork which has no feathers, a leathery skin, membranous wings, and teeth in its jaw." He grinned and blinked and bowed until his colleague turned and walked away. In the morning, after a frugal breakfast of coffee and manioc, we had to be economical of our stores, we held a council of war as to the best method of ascending to the plateau above us. Challenger presided with a solemnity as if he were the Lord Chief Justice on the bench. Picture him seated upon a rock, his absurd boyish straw hat tilted on the back of his head, his supercilious eyes dominating us from under his drooping lids, his great black beard wagging as he slowly defined our present situation and our future movements. Beneath him you might have seen the three of us, myself, sunburnt, young, and vigorous after our open-air tramp. Summerlee, solemn but still critical behind his eternal pipe. Lord John, as keen as a razor edge, with his supple, alert figure leaning upon his rifle, and his eager eyes fixed eagerly upon the speaker. Behind us were grouped the two swarthy half-breeds and the little knot of Indians, while in front and above us towered those huge ruddy ribs of rocks which kept us from our goal. "I need not say," said our leader, "that on the occasion of my last visit I exhausted every means of climbing the cliff, and where I fail, I do not think that anyone else is likely to succeed, for I am something of a mountaineer. I had none of the appliances of a rock climber with me, but I have taken the precaution to bring them now. With their aid, I am positive I could climb that detached pinnacle to the summit. But so long as the main cliff overhangs, it is vain to attempt ascending that. I was hurried upon my last visit by the approach of the rainy season and by the exhaustion of my supplies. These considerations limited my time, and I can only claim that I have surveyed about 6 miles of the cliff to the east of us, finding no possible way out. What then shall we now do? There seems to be only one reasonable course, said Professor Summerlee. If you have explored the east, we should travel along the base of the cliff to the west, and seek for a practicable point for our ascent. That's it, said Lord John. The odds are that this plateau is of no great size, and we shall travel round it until we either find an easy way up it, or come back to the point from which we started. I have already explained to our young friend here, said Challenger. He has a way of alluding to me as if I were a schoolchild 10 years old, that it is quite impossible that there should be an easy way up anywhere, for the simple reason that if there were, the summit would not be so isolated, and these conditions would not obtain which have affected so singular an interference with the general laws of survival. Yet, I admit there may very well be where an expert human climber may reach the summit, and yet a cumbrous and heavy animal be unable to descend. It is possible. How do you know that, sir? Asked Summerlee sharply. Because my predecessor, the American Maple White, actually made such an ascent. How otherwise could he have seen the monster which he sketched in his notebook? There you reason somewhat ahead of the prudest or obtuse. I am of opinion that we cannot do better than break up our camp and travel to the westward until we find some means of ascent. The ground at the foot of the cliff was rocky and broken, so that the going was slow and difficult. Suddenly we came, however, upon something we had our hearts. It was the site of an old encampment, with several empty Chicago wheat tins, a bottle labeled brandy, a broken tin opener, and a quantity of other travelers' debris. A crumpled, disintegrated newspaper revealed itself as the Chicago Democrat, though the date had been obliterated. Not mine, said Challenger. It must be Maple White's. Lord John had been gazing curiously at a great tree fern which overshadowed the encampment. I say, look at this, said he. I believe it was meant for a signpost. A slip of hard wood had been nailed to the tree in such a way as to point to the westward. Most certainly a signpost, said Challenger. What else? Finding himself upon a dangerous errand, our pioneer has left this sign, so that any party which follows him may know the way he has taken. Perhaps we shall come upon some other indications as we proceed. We did indeed, but they were of a terrible and most unexpected nature. Immediately beneath the cliff there grew a considerable patch of high bamboo, like that which we had traversed in our journey. Many of these stems were 20 feet high, with sharp, strong tops, so that even as they stood, they made formidable spears. We were passing along the edge of this cover, when my eye was caught by the gleam of something white within it. Thrusting in my head between the stems, I found myself gazing at a fleshless skull. The whole skeleton was there, and the skull had detached itself and lay some feet nearer to the open. With a few blows from the machetes of our Indians, we cleared the spot and were able to study the details of this old tragedy. Only a few shreds of clothes could still be distinguished, but there were the remains of boots upon the bony feet, and it was very clear that the dead man was a European. A gold watch by Hudson of New York and a chain which held a stylographic pen lay among the bones. There was also a silver cigarette case with J.C. from AES upon the lid. The state of the metal seemed to show that the catastrophe had occurred no great time before. "Who can he be?" said Lord John. "Poor devil! Every bone in his body seems to be broken. And the bamboo grows through his smashed ribs, said somebody. It's a fast-growing plant, but it is surely inconceivable that this body could have been here while the canes grew to be 20 feet in length. As to the man's identity, said Professor Challenger, I have no doubt whatever upon that point. As I made my way up the river before I reached you at the fazenda, I instituted very particular inquiries about Maple White. At Para, they knew nothing. Fortunately, I had a definite clue, for there was a particular picture in his sketchbook which showed him taking lunch with a certain ecclesiastic at Rosario. This priest I was able to find, and though he proved a very argumentative fellow, who took it absurdly amiss that I should point out to him the corrosive effect which modern science must have upon his beliefs, he nonetheless gave me some positive information. Maple White passed Rosario 4 years ago, or 2 years before I saw his body. He was not alone at the time, but there was a friend, an American named James Culver, who remained in the boat, did not meet this ecclesiastic. I think, therefore, that there can be no doubt that we are now looking upon the remains of this James Culver. No, said Lord John. Is there much doubt as to how he met his death? He has fallen or been chucked from the top, and so been impaled. How else could he come by his broken bones, and how could he have been stuck through by these canes with the cords so high above our heads? A hush came over us as we stood round these shattered remains and realized the truth of Lord John Roxton's words. The beetling head of the cliff projected over the cane brake. Undoubtedly, he had fallen from above. But had he fallen? Had it been an accident? Already ominous and terrible possibilities began to form round that unknown man. We moved off in silence and continued to coast round the line of cliffs, which were as even and unbroken as some of those monstrous Antarctic ice fields which I have seen depicted as stretching from horizon to horizon and towering high above the mastheads of the exploring vessel. In 5 miles we saw no rift or break, and then, suddenly, we perceived something which filled us with new hope. In a hollow of the rock, protected from rain, there was drawn a rough arrow in chalk, pointing still to the westward. Maple White again, said Roger. He had some presentiment that worthy theft would follow close behind him. He had chalk, then. Box of colored chalks was among the effects I found in his knapsack. I remember that the white one was worn to a stump. That is certainly good evidence, said somebody. We can only accept his guidance and follow on to the westward. We had proceeded some 5 more miles when again we saw a white arrow among the rocks. It was at a point where the face of the cliff was for the first time split into a narrow cleft. Inside the cleft was a second guidance mark, which pointed right upwards, with the tip somewhat elevated, as if the spot indicated were above the level of the ground. It was a solemn place, for the walls were so gigantic, and the slit of blue sky so narrow and so obscured by a double fringe of verdure, that only a dim and shadowy light penetrated to the top. We had had no food for many hours. We were very weary with the stony and irregular journey, but our nerves were too strong to allow us to halt. We ordered the camp to be pitched, however, and leaving the Indians to arrange it, we 4, with the 2 half-breeds, proceeded up the narrow gorge. It was not more than 40 feet across at the mouth, but it rapidly closed until it ended in an acute angle, too straight and smooth for an ascent. Certainly, it was not this which our pioneer had attempted to indicate. We made our way back. The whole gorge was not more than a quarter of a mile deep. And then, suddenly, the quick eyes of Lord John fell upon what we were seeking. High up above our heads, amid the dark shadows, there was one circle of deeper gloom. Surely it could only be the opening of a cave. The base of the cliff was heaped with loose stones at the spot, and it was not difficult to clamber up. When we reached it, all doubt was removed. Not only was it an opening into the rock, but on the side of it there was marked once again the sign of the arrow. Here was the point, and this was the means by which Mabel White and his ill-fated comrade had made their ascent. We were too excited to return to the camp, but must make our first exploration at once. Lord John had an electric torch in his knapsack, and this had to serve us as light. He advanced, throwing his clear little circlet of yellow radiance before him, while in single file we followed at his heels. The cave had evidently been water-worn, the sides being smooth and the floor covered with rounded stones. It was of such a size that a single man could just fit through by stooping. For 50 yards it ran almost straight into the rock, and then it ascended at an angle of 45. Presently, this incline became even steeper, and we found ourselves climbing upon hands and knees among loose rubble which slid from beneath us. Suddenly, an exclamation broke from Lord Roxton. "It is blocked!" he said. Clustering behind him, we saw in the yellow field of light a wall of broken basalt which extended to the ceiling. "The roof has fallen in!" In vain we dragged out some of the pieces. The only effect was that the larger ones became detached and threatened to roll down the gradient and crush us. It was evident that the obstacle was far beyond any efforts which we could make to remove it. The road by which Mabel White had ascended was no longer available. Too much cast down to speak, we stumbled down the dark tunnel and made our way back to the camp. One incident occurred, however, before we left the gorge, which is of importance in view of what came. We had gathered in a little group some 40 feet beneath the mouth of the cave, when a huge shot past us with tremendous force. It was the narrowest escape for one or all of us. We could not ourselves see whence the rock had come, but full of this new development, and the situation was enough before. But if the obstructions of nature were increased by the deliberate opposition of man, then our case was indeed a hopeless one. And yet, as we looked up at that beautiful fringe of verdure only a few hundreds of feet above our heads, there was not one of us who could conceive the idea of returning to London until we had explored it to its depths. On discussing the situation, we determined that our best course was to continue to coast round the plateau in the hope of finding some other means of reaching the top. The line of cliffs, which had decreased considerably in height, had already begun to trend from west to north, and if we could take this as representing the arc of a circle, the whole circumference could not be very great. At the worst, then, we should be back in a few days at our starting point. We made a march that day which totaled some 22 miles, without any change in our prospects. I may mention that our aneroid shows us that in the continual incline which we have ascended since we abandoned our canoes, we have risen to no less than 3,000 feet above sea level. Hence, there is a considerable change, both in the temperature and in the vegetation. We have shaken off some of that horrible insect life which is the bane of tropical travel. A few palms still survive, and many tree ferns, but the Amazonian trees have been all left behind. It was pleasant to see the convolvulus, the passion flower, and the begonia, all reminding me of home, here among these inhospitable rocks. There was a red begonia, just the same color as one that is kept in a pot in the window of a certain villa in Streatham. But I am drifting into private reminiscence. That night, I am still speaking of the first day of our circumnavigation of the plateau, a great experience awaited us. and one which forever set at rest any doubts which we could have had as to the wonders so near us. You will realize as you read it, my dear Mr. McCardle, and possibly for the first time, that the paper has not sent me on a wild goose chase, and that there is inconceivably fine copy waiting for the world whenever we are the professor's leave to make use of it. I shall not dare to publish these articles unless I can bring back my proofs to England, or I shall be hailed as the journalistic Munchausen of all time. I have no doubt that you feel the same way yourself, and that you would not care to stake the whole credit of the gazettes upon this adventure until we get the chorus of criticism and skepticism which elicits. So the author must still wait its turn in editorial drawing. And yet, it was all over in a flash, and there was no sequel to it, save in our own convictions. What occurred was this. Lord John had shot an ahouti, which is a small pig-like animal, and half of it being given to the Indians, we were cooking the other half upon our fire. There is a chill in the air after dark, and we had all drawn close to the blaze. The night was moonless, but there were stars, and one could see a little distance across the plain. But suddenly, out of the darkness, out of the night, there with a swish like an aeroplane. The whole group of us were instanced by a canopy of leathery wings, and I had a momentary vision of a long snake-like neck, a fierce red greedy eye, and a great snapping beak, filled, to my amazement, with little gleaming teeth. The next instant it was gone, and so was our dinner. A huge black shadow, 20 feet across, skimmed up into the air, and for an instant the monster wings blotted out the stars, and then it vanished over the brow of the cliff above us. We all sat in amazed silence round the fire, like the heroes of Virgil when the harpies come down upon them. It was somebody who was the first to speak. "Professor Challenger," said he in a solemn voice which quavered with emotion, "I owe you an apology. Sir, I am very much in the wrong, and I beg that you will forget what is past." It was handsomely said, and the two men, for the first time, shook hands. So much we have gained by this clear vision of our first pterodactyl. It was worth a stolen supper to bring two such men together. But if prehistoric life existed upon the plateau, it was not superabundant, for we had no further glimpse of it during the next 3 days. During this time we traversed a barren and forbidding country, which alternated between stony desert and desolate marshes full of many wildfowl upon the north and east of the cliffs. From that direction the place is really inaccessible, and were it not for a hardish ledge which runs at the very base of the precipice, we should have had to turn back. Many times we were up to our waists in the slime and blubber of an old semi-tropical swamp. To make matters worse, the place seemed to be a favorite breeding place of the Harakaka snake, the most venomous and aggressive in South America. Again, this putrid bog, and it was only by keeping our shotguns forever ready that we could feel safe from them. One funnel-shaped depression in the morass, of a livid green in color from some lichen which festered in it, will always remain as a nightmare memory in my mind. It seems to have been a special nest of these vermin, and the slopes were alive with them, all writhing in our direction. For it is a peculiarity of the Harakaka that he will always attack man at first sight. There were too many for us to shoot, so we fairly took to our heels and ran until we were exhausted. I shall always remember, as we looked back, how far behind we could see the heads and necks of our horrible pursuers rising and falling amid the reeds. Harakaka Slime, we named it in the map which we are constructing. The cliffs up on the farther side had lost their ruddy tint, being chocolate brown in color. The vegetation was more scattered along the top of them, and they had sunk to 300 or 400 feet in height. But in no place could we find any point where they could be ascended. If anything, they were more impossible than at the first point where we had met them. Their absolute steepness is indicated in a photograph which I took over the stony desert. Surely, said I as we discussed the situation, the rain must find its way down somehow. There are bound to be water channels in the rocks. Our young friend has glimpses of lucidity, said Professor Challenger, patting me upon the shoulder. Oh, the rain must go somewhere, I repeated. He keeps a firm grip upon actuality. The only drawback is that we have conclusively proved by ocular demonstration that there are no water channels down the rocks. Where then does it go? I persisted. I think it may be fairly assumed that if it does not come outwards, it must run inward. Then there is a lake in the center. So I should suppose. It is more than likely that the lake may be an old crater, said somebody. The whole formation is, of course, highly volcanic. But however that may be, I should expect to find the surface of the plateau slope inwards with a considerable sheet of water in the center, which may drain off, by some subterranean channel, into the marshes of the Harakaka swamp. Or evaporation may preserve an equilibrium, remarked Challenger. And the two learned men wandered off into one of their usual scientific arguments, which were as comprehensible as Chinese to the layman. On the 6th day, we completed our first circuit of the cliffs, and found ourselves back at the first camp, beside the isolated pinnacle of rock. We were a disconsolate party, for nothing could have been more my investigation, and it was absolutely certain that there was no single point where the most active human being could hope to scale the cliff. The place which Maplewhite's chalk marks had indicated as his own means of access was now entirely impassable. What were we to do now? Our stores of provisions, supplemented by our guns, were holding out well, but the day must come when they would need replenishment. In a couple of months, the rains might be expected, and we should be washed out of our camp. The rock was harder than marble. Any attempt at cutting a path for so great a height was more than our time and our resources would admit. No wonder that we looked gloomily at each other that night, and sought our blankets with hardly a word exchanged. I remember that as I dropped off to sleep, my last recollection was that Challenger was squatting, like a monstrous bullfrog, by the fire, his huge head in his hands, sunk apparently in the deepest thought, and entirely oblivious to the good night which I wished him. But it was a very different Challenger who greeted us in the morning, a Challenger with contentment and self-congratulation shining from his whole person. He faced us as we assembled for breakfast with a deprecating false modesty in his eyes, as who should say, I know that I deserve all that you can say, but I pray you to spare my blushes by not saying it. His beard bristled exultantly, his chest was thrown out, and his hand was thrust into the front of his jacket. So, in his fancy, may he see himself sometimes gracing the vacant pedestal in Trafalgar Square, and adding one more to the horrors of the London street. Eureka! He cried, his teeth shining through his beard. Gentlemen, you may congratulate me, and we may congratulate each other. The problem is solved. You have found a way up? I venture to think so. And where? For answer, he pointed to the spire-like pinnacle upon our right. Our faces, or mine at least, fell as we surveyed it. That it could be climbed, we had our companion's assurance, but a horrible abyss lay between it and the plateau. We could never get across, I gasped. "We can at least all reach the summit," said he. "When we are up, I may be able to show you that the resources of an inventive mind are not yet exhausted." After breakfast, we unpacked the bundle in which our leader had brought his climbing accessories. From it, he took a coil of the strongest and lightest rope, 150 feet in length, with climbing irons, clamps, and other devices. John was an experienced mountaineer, and Summerlee had done some rough climbing various times, so that I was really the novice at rock work of the party. But my strength and activity may have made up for my want of experience. It was not, in reality, a very stiff task, though there were moments which made my hair bristle upon my head. The first half was perfectly easy, but from there upwards it became continually steeper, until, for the last 50 feet, we were literally clinging with our fingers and toes to tiny ledges and crevices in the rock. I could not have accomplished it, nor could Summerlee, if Challenger had not gained the summit. It was extraordinary to see such activity in so unwieldy a creature, and there fixed the rope round the trunk of a considerable tree which grew there. With this as our support, we were soon able to scramble up the jagged wall until we found ourselves upon the small grassy platform, some 25 feet each way, which formed the summit. The first impression which I received when I recovered my breath was of the extraordinary view over the country which we had traversed. The whole Brazilian plain seemed to lie beneath us, extending away and away until it ended in dim blue mists upon the farthest skyline. In the foreground was the long slope, strewn with rocks and dotted with tree ferns. Farther off, in the middle distance, looking over the Saddleback Hill, I could just see the yellow and green mass of bamboos through which we had passed. And then, gradually, the vegetation increased until it formed the huge forest which extended as far as the eyes could reach, and for a good 2,000 miles beyond. I was still drinking in this wonderful panorama when the heavy hand of the professor fell upon my shoulder. "This way, my young friend," said he. "Vestia nulla retrorsum. Never look rearwards, but always to your glorious goal." The level of the plateau, when I turned, was exactly that on which we stood, and the green bank of bushes, with occasional trees, was so near that it was difficult to realize how inaccessible it remained. At a rough guess, the gulf was 40 feet across, but so far as I could see, it might as well have been 40 miles. I placed one arm round the trunk of the tree and leaned over the abyss. Far down were the small dark figures of our servants looking up at us. The wall was absolutely precipitous, as was that which faced me. "This is indeed curious," said the creaking voice of Professor Summerlee. I turned and found that he was examining with great interest the tree to which I clung. That smooth bark and those small ribbed leaves seemed familiar to my eyes. "Why," I cried, "it's a beech!" "Exactly," said Summerlee. "A fellow countryman in a far land." "Not only a fellow countryman, my good sir," said Challenger, "but also, if I may be allowed to enlarge your simile, an ally of the first value. This beech tree will be our savior." "By George!" cried Lord John. "A bridge!" "Exactly, my friends, a bridge. It is not for nothing that I have spent an hour last night in focusing my mind upon the situation. I have some recollection of once remarking to our young friend here that GEC is at his best when his back is to the wall. Last night you will admit that our backs were to the wall. But where willpower and intellect go together, there is always a way out. A drawbridge had to be found which could be dropped across the abyss. Behold it! It was certainly a brilliant idea. The tree was a good 60 feet in height, and if it only fell the right way, it could easily cross the chasm. Challenger had slung the cat axe over his shoulder when he ascended. Now he handed it to me. "Our young friend has the thews and sinews," said he. "I think he will be the most useful at this task. I must beg, however, that you will kindly refrain from thinking for yourself, and that you will do exactly what you are told." Under his direction, I cut such gashes in the sides of the trees as would ensure that it should fall as we desired. It had already a strong natural tilt in the direction of the plateau, so that the matter was not difficult. Finally, I set to work in earnest upon the trunk, taking turn and turn with Lord John. In a little over an hour, there was a loud crack. The tree swayed forward and then crashed over, burying its branches among bushes on the farther side. The severed trunk rolled to the very edge of our platform, and for one terrible second, we all thought it was over. It balanced itself, however, a few inches from the edge, and there was our bridge to the unknown. All of us, without a word, shook hands with Professor Challenger, who raised his straw hats and bowed deeply to each in turn. "I claim the honor," said he, "to be the first to cross to the unknown land. A fitting subject, no doubt, for some future historical painting." He had approached the bridge when Lord John laid his hand upon his coat. "My dear chap," said he, "I really cannot allow it." "Cannot allow it, sir?" The head went back and the beard forward. "When it is a matter of science, don't you know, I follow your lead, because you are by way of Your department, sir. Well, we all have our professions, and soldiering is mine. We are, according to my ideas, invading a new country, which may or may not be chock full of enemies of sorts. To budge blindly into it for want of a little common sense and patience isn't my notion of management. The remonstrance was too reasonable to be disregarded. Challenger tossed his head and shrugged his heavy shoulders. Well, sir, what do you propose? For all I know, there may be a tribe of cannibals waiting for lunchtime around those very bushes, said Lord John, looking across the bridge. It's better to learn wisdom before you get into the cooking pot. So we will content ourselves with hoping that there is no trouble waiting for us, and at the same time we will act as if there were. Malone and I will go down again, therefore, and we will fetch up the 4 rifles, together with Gomez and the other. One man can then go across, and the rest will cover him with guns, until he sees that it is safe for the whole crowd to come along. Challenger sat down upon the cut stump and groaned his impatience. But Summerlee and I were of one mind that Lord John was our leader when such practical details were in question. The climb was a more simple thing now that the rope dangled down the face of the worst part of the ascent. Within an hour we had brought up the rifles and a shotgun. The half-breeds had ascended also, and under Lord John's orders they carried up a bale of provisions in case our first exploration should be a long one. We had each bandoliers of cartridges. Now, Challenger, if you really insist upon being the first man in, said Lord John, every preparation. I am much indebted to you for your gracious mission, said the angry professor, for never was a man so intolerant of every form of authority. Since you are good enough to allow it, I shall most certainly take it upon myself to act as pioneer upon this occasion. Seating himself with a leg overhanging the abyss on each side and his hatchet slung upon his back, Challenger hopped his way across the trunk and was soon at the other side. He clambered up and waved his arms in the air. At last, he cried, at last. I gazed anxiously at him, with a vague expectation that some terrible fate would dart at him from the curtain of green behind him. But all was quiet, save that a strange, many-colored bird flew up from under his feet and vanished among the trees. Summerlee was the second. His wiry energy is wonderful in so frail a frame. He insisted upon having 2 rifles slung upon his back, so that both professors were armed when he had made his transit. I came next, and tried hard not to look down into the horrible gulf over which I was passing. Summerlee held out the butt end of his rifle, and then instantly I was able to grasp his hand. As to Lord John, he walked across, actually walked without support. He must have nerve iron. And there we were, the 4 of us, upon the dreamland, the lost world of Maple White. To all of us, it seemed the moment of our supreme triumph. Who could have guessed that it was the prelude to our supreme disaster? Let me say in a few words how the crushing blow fell upon us. We had turned away from the edge and had penetrated about 50 yards of close brushwood when there came a frightful rending crash from behind us. With one impulse, we rushed back the way that we had come. The bridge was gone. Far down at the base of the cliff, I saw, as I looked over, a tangled mass of branches and splintered trunk. It was our beech tree. Had the edge of the platform crumbled and let it through? For a moment, this explanation was in all our minds. The next, from the farther side of the rocky pinnacle before us, a swarthy face, the face of Gomez, the half-breed, was slowly protruded. Yes, it was Gomez, but no longer the Gomez of the demure smile and the mask-like expression. Here was a face with flashing eyes and distorted features, a face convulsed with hatred and with the mad joy of gratified revenge. Lord Roxton, he shouted. Lord John Roxton. Well, said our companion, here I am. A shriek of laughter came across the abyss. Yes, there you are, you English dog, and there you will remain. I have waited and waited, and now has come my chance. You found it hard to get up. You will find it harder to get down. You cursed fools, you are trapped, every one of you. We were too astounded to speak. We could only stand there, staring in amazement. A great broken bough upon the grass showed whence he had gained his leverage to tilt over our bridge. The face had vanished, but presently it was up again, more frantic than before. We nearly killed you with a stone at the cave, he cried. But this is better. It is slower and more terrible. Your pearls will whiten up there. None will know where you lie, or come to cover them. As you lie dying, think of Lopez, whom you shot 5 years ago on the Putumayo River. I am his brother, and come what will, I will die happy now, for his memory has been avenged. A furious hand was shaken at us, and then all was quiet. Had the half-breed simply wrought his vengeance and then escaped, all might have been well with him. It was that foolish, irresistible Latin impulse to be dramatic which brought his own downfall. Roxton, the man who had earned himself the name of the Flail of the Lord through 3 countries, was not one who could be safely taunted. The half-breed was descending on the farther side of the pinnacle, but before he could reach the ground, Lord John had run along the edge of the plateau and gained a point from which he could see his man. There was a single crack of his rifle, and though we saw nothing, we heard the scream, and then the distant thud of the falling body. Roxton came back to us with a face of granite. I have been a blind simpleton, he said bitterly. It's my folly that has brought you all into this trouble. I should have remembered that these people have long memories for blood feuds and have been more upon my guard. Oh, what about the other one? It took 2 of them to lever that tree over the edge. I could have shot him, but I let him go. He may have had no part in it. Perhaps it would have been better if I had killed him, for he must, as you say, have lent a hand. Now that we had the clue to his action, each of us could cast back and remember some sinister act upon the part of the half-breed. His constant desire to know our plans, his arrest outside our tent when he was overhearing them, the furtive looks of hatred which from time to time one or other of us had surprised. We were still discussing it, endeavoring to adjust our minds to these new conditions, when a singular scene in the plain below arrested our attention. A man in white clothes, who could only be the surviving half-breed, was running as one does run when death is the pacemaker. Behind him, only a few yards in his rear, bounded the huge ebony figure of Sambo, our devoted Negro. Even as we looked, he sprang upon the back of the fugitive and flung his arms round his neck. They rolled on the ground together. An instant afterwards, Sambo rose, looked at the prostrate man, and then, waving his hand joyously to us, came running in our direction. The white figure lay motionless in the middle of the great plain. Our 2 traders had been destroyed, but the mischief that they had done lived after them. By no possible means could we get back to the pinnacle. We had been natives of the world. Now we were natives of the plateau. The 2 things were separate and apart. There was the plain which led to the canoes. Yonder, beyond the violet, hazy horizon, was the stream which led back to civilization. But the link between was missing. No human ingenuity could suggest a means of bridging the chasm which yawned between ourselves and our past lives. One instant had altered the whole conditions of our existence. It was at such a moment that I learned the stuff of which my three comrades were composed. They were grave, it is true, and thoughtful, but of an invincible serenity. For the moment we could only sit among the bushes in patience and wait the coming of Zan. Presently his honest black face topped the rocks, and his Herculean figure emerged upon the top of the pinnacle. "What I do now?" he cried. "You tell me, and I do it." It was a question which it was easier to ask than to answer. One thing only was clear. He was our one trusting link with the outside world. On no account must he leave us. "No, no," he cried. "I not leave you. Whatever come, you always find me here. But no able to keep Indians. Already they say too much Kurupuri live on this place, and they go home. Now you leave them, me no able to keep them." It was a fact that our Indians had shown in many ways of late that they were weary of their journey, anxious to return. We realized that Sambo spoke the truth, and that it would be impossible for him to keep them. "Make them wait till tomorrow, Sambo," I shouted. "Then I can send letter back by them." "Very good, sir. I promise they wait till tomorrow," said the negro. "But what I do for you now?" There was plenty for him to do, and admirably the faithful fellow did it. First of all, under our directions, he undid the rope from the tree stump and threw one end of it across to us. It was not thicker than a clothesline, but it was of great strength, and though we could not make a bridge of it, we might well find it invaluable if we had any climbing to do. He then fastened his end of the rope to the package of supplies which had been carried up, and we were able to drag it across. This gave us the means of life for at least a week, even if we found nothing else. Finally, he descended and carried up 2 other packets of mixed goods, a box of ammunition and a number of other things, all of which we got across by throwing our rope to him and hauling it back. It was evening when he at last climbed down, with a final assurance that he would keep the Indians till next morning. And so it is that I have spent nearly the whole of this, our first night upon the plateau, writing up our experiences by the light of a single candle lantern. We stopped and camped at the very edge of the cliff, quenching our thirst with 2 bottles of Apollinaris which were in one of the cases. It is vital to us to find water, but I think even Lord John himself had had adventures enough for one day, and none of us felt inclined to make the first push into the unknown. We forebore to light a fire or to make any unnecessary